Democratic Senator Chris Coons, Vice Chair of the Senate Ethics Committee. Good to have you, Senator.
Good to be with you, Chris.
Think Moore wins?
Well, I think that's going to be up to the voters of Alabama. This is going to be very close. As the last segment on this show reminded us, it is a hotly contested race where there are a great number of issues. Myself, as a lawyer, as a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, it's striking to me that Roy Moore was a Supreme Court justice in Alabama and was twice disciplined for failing to understand that the law comes first. Those of us who are people of faith may be strongly moved by our faith principles, but when you get sworn in, either as a senator or as a judge, you put your hand on the Bible and you swear allegiance to the Constitution, not the other way around.
He understands, Senator. He just doesn't accept it. Let me ask you something. If he wins and he comes to the Senate, I know you're not going to talk about particulars of process, but there is this notion that Roy Moore may not be seated as a senator. I question that suggestion. I don't see how you could keep him from being seated.
That's right, Chris. Supreme Court precedent strongly suggests that as long as a candidate meets the constitutional requirements to be seated, he must be seated. It is more likely that there will then be some vigorous debate about whether he should remain in the Senate.
Right, but the expulsion process is really difficult. It's been done a handful of times in our entire history. Where is the confidence that that would be anything that would happen, at least something that would happen in any kind of short order?
Well, Chris, it would be the Senate Ethics Committee that would review allegations before any vote of expulsion, so I'm not going to get into any specifics about that.
Right, but it wouldn't be quick, that's for sure. And who even knows if the process would be respected? Why do I say that? Because of what just happened with Al Franken. Are you comfortable as a Democrat that you guys pushed him out before due process even took its place?
When you say you guys, Chris, I made no public statement about Senator
Got to own
Franken.
your team, Senator. Got to own your team.
I'll say that as the vice chair of the one committee that is truly bipartisan, I have worked very hard to stay out of the matter relating to Senator Franken.
Are you troubled by the standard? People will say, we just heard in the last segment, Ed Martin said, hey, he admitted it. What did Franken admit? He apologized to women who felt that he had been inappropriate. He's sorry they felt that way. He doesn't remember things the way they say happened. He never said he groped. They show the picture of him, admittedly, objectively, a stupid picture, but not evidence of groping. He doesn't say it was evidence of groping. So what is the standard at play here about when someone can stay and when someone has to go?
Well, Chris, this is a political process, not a legal process. But I'll say that I have confidence in the Senate Ethics Committee. I do think it is striking that the president, who is not subject to the Senate Ethics Committee, has bragged about sexual assault, has been accused by 19 different women, and yet that is not being actively debated, discussed, or closely reviewed by members of the other party. It is my hope, though, I'll say this, Chris, that we are at the beginning of a long overdue reckoning in our country, of a long and widespread practice of men in positions of power misusing that power in ways that have truly harmed women at all levels in our society. And so I'm someone who, as a lawyer, believes in due process, but I also think that we're at the beginning, not at the end, of what I think is an important moment in American society.
Well, I'm just saying, we just saw where a big list of Democratic senators wound up trumping due process. The Senate investigation hearing never was able to be resolved with Franken. Now there are calls to look at the allegations into President Trump. Do you think that happens?
Well, I certainly hope voters keep in mind their views about what the president did or didn't say and do. It was known and it was litigated before the election. But in my view, it's distressing when people are willing to put morality aside and to vote for or against someone based on what they will or won't do on taxes or on immigration or on constitutional rights. I don't think that we should have folks in public life who are above the law and who are not accountable.
Do you think it gets reviewed?
My hunch is it gets reviewed at the next election.
But not,
we don't
but not
have
by the Senate.
mechanism to review it.
Right.
Right. We don't have the mechanism to review it in the Senate.
Right. I think that's a good point to make and for the audience to hear, because there's a lot of talk about will it happen. I don't know how you could make it happen, other than some impeachment process, but we're a long way from that. You're also calling for a hearing into possible presidential interference with the U.S. attorney's offices. How so?
Well, we have a troubling series of incidents here where the president, we know, called in former FBI Director Jim Comey and asked for personal loyalty and tried to get him to go easy on General Flynn, who's now pled guilty to one count and is cooperating with Robert Mueller's investigation. There are recent allegations or reports that the president is now actively interviewing U.S. attorney candidates in a number of jurisdictions where he also happens, he and his family, to have significant real estate holdings. This is just part of a long and troubling pattern of behavior where the president doesn't respect the separation between the Department of Justice and his role as the president. The president's lawyers have recently suggested that the president's not capable of committing obstruction of justice because he has complete authority over the Department of Justice. I just think that's not a tenable standing. That would suggest our president is above the law and could do whatever he wants with any investigation or proceeding. I've specifically focused on the U.S. attorney hirings because I think this has not gotten a lot of attention, and it's just the latest in a whole series of troubling steps by this president to interfere in our Department of Justice and its regular workings.
All right, Senator, I appreciate you making the case. I know some of this stuff is sticky, but I got to pick at it. That's the job, and if I don't get to speak to you, have a very Merry Christmas. Good to see you as always.
Thank you. Merry Christmas to you too, Chris.
All right.